Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video I want to talk about the Polaris, what it does well and what issues it highlights. The Polaris has been around for a few months now, which has given the community a lot of time to experiment and try the ship in different scenarios, which showed us many strong sides of the ship and some new features, but also many gaps in features and balancing and the general concept of multi-crew. So today I would like to break it down and see what can be done. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here is a shout out to our amazing patrons and channel members for their support of the channel and everything else I do. First, let's talk about all the good things the Polaris brought into the game. Obviously, it was the first truly capital ship to be added to the game, though you could argue that it was actually the 890 Jump, but the Polaris is at the very least the first player flyable military capital ship, which is a big achievement on its own. The Polaris gave us another ship that can carry large vehicles like the Nova or the Atlas platform, but it also brought a handful of interesting features. First of all, an expansion to capital class components. While we saw some pseudo capital class components with the 890 and the NPC flown Idris, the Polaris introduced proper capital components, which I believe was supposed to serve as the foundation for the follow-on rebalance and rework of all ship components and ship component loadouts. The other major new feature are the automated defense turrets, or PDCs, which were actually a part of other concepts like the Constellation Phoenix, but weren't implemented until now. And this feature specifically has created a demand to add PDCs to other ships that previously didn't have them. And we will look at why in a moment. But the Polaris also has some odd features. For example, the Torpedo Operator Station, which is located deep within the ship, which seems like an odd location for a station that controls the most powerful weapon the ship has. Now, you could say that the torpedoes are supposed to be used over long ranges, so actually seeing your target matters much less than seeing a radar signature you can lock onto. But at the same time, given how missile operator mode works right now, you still need to see where you're shooting. Also, it seems weird to me that the Torpedo Operator console is a standing console rather than a seat, so I think it would make more sense to move it to the bridge as a full seat and maybe assign it some other features, which we will get into in a moment. But first, let me take a brief pause to go over some public service announcements. First of all, you can still submit questions for the next episode of the Star Citizen Q&A. And second, I am looking for organizations to interview for the Find Your Org show, so if you're an org leader and would like to be featured, reach out to me via email or Discord. The May slot is still open at the time of recording, so hurry up. All links are in the description and the pinned comment. Now let's get back to the video. So the Polaris seemed like the ultimate multi-crew ship. Lots of health, lots of turrets, and lots of opportunities for fun. And some people used it that way. But for every Polaris I see with any crew besides the pilot, I see at least 4 that are being run solo. Don't take me wrong, if you bought a Polaris, you should by all means be able to fly it on your own, but only as an oversized and very expensive to operate cargo hauler. And that's perfectly okay, and that's what some Polaris owners seem to be doing anyway. However, we are also seeing a lot of people using the automated turrets in a kind of exploitative way. The less harmful method I see is people soloing high-level bounties with the Polaris. All you need to do is just park it in the area. The targets don't have enough firepower to break the shield, and even if they happen to, the Polaris has so much health they can't chip it away before they are killed by the automated defenses. Which I guess should work for some of the lower level bounties, but not for the highest levels. For example, I think the automated turrets should be able to take out 1 or 2 small ships attacking. But anything bigger should take a very long time, especially considering that PDCs are intended as missile defense and snub and light fighter deterrent. The more harmful Polaris exploit is parking it over a point of interest and just letting it shoot everything. Now, for full transparency, I have seen this done once at Hathor and a few times over at Pyro Outposts, so it's hard to say how common it is. but it's still pretty annoying. Obviously, if you're in a group doing the Align and Mine event, you probably expect a Polaris to show up at some point and you prepare accordingly. But if you're just delivering something to an outpost, there is very little you can do. But in both cases, you have a solo player using a single ship that is not meant to be used solo to block or delay the activity of multiple other players. Also, I read a very interesting post on Spectrum that I hopefully won't forget to link in the description about how the Polaris is actually the best dropship in the game. Definitely give it a read. It might sound a bit biased to some, but it highlights the problem well, and offers what I see as a pretty reasonable solution. However, in this video we're focusing on the general multi-crew problem, or rather the lack of multi-crew, especially for combat, and the now apparent issue with automated turrets. So let's have a look at the turrets first. For many years, the common answer to how are you going to operate your big ship alone was I'm going to automate the turrets with AI blades and NPC crew. And this was widely accepted as the solution. Now, with the addition of PDCs as the first automated ship weapons, we are seeing that this would indeed be a valid and working solution. But we also see that it would create some situations where one player can effectively win any encounter just by being there, which creates an interesting problem. A group could, in theory, run 10 NPC crewed Polaris instead of one player crewed one, effectively giving them 10 times the firepower with the same number of players. Not to mention that you could still just park the Polaris somewhere and let the turrets do the work for you. Now, the more attentive of you will say that doing so would be cost prohibitive. And on paper you are right. Hiring NPC crew and buying AI blades will be expensive. But that's not a gatekeeping factor. The moment you spawn a capital ship, you're accepting that you have opened a money sink, and the expectation is that you don't care how much you spend, and you either have another significant source of money to cover the expense, or you understand that whatever you're trying to do with that capital ship has to go very well to earn back the money. However, if your main goal is to be a nuisance, no amount of expense in-game will stop you from doing so. For people who do this with malicious intent, I don't think it would matter if they pay 1,000,000 credits for blades and crew just to block a location for an hour. And there will always be people who do this, which is proven by people still finding ways to break into your hangar and kill you even though there is no loot to be gained and they die immediately after. Unfortunately, you can't fix human behavior, so this is just going to keep happening. However, there is an underlying problem. For a while now, the general consensus has been that if you want to engage in ship combat as a group, you will have an easier time if you bring 6 Hornets instead of a Hammerhead or any other multi-crew ship. While on the other hand, for industrial gameplay, multi-crew seems to be thriving. You always see crewed reclaimers or moles or vultures and fortunes working with cargo ships to increase profit. So why are we seeing two different approaches to the same problem within the same game? The answer is actually very simple. The goals and functions are different. For industrial players, the goal is profit, and by using multi-crew ships like the Reclaimer or the Mole, they can take on more difficult challenges, such as bigger minables or ships to salvage. On the other hand, for combat, the goal is generally to win, and with the current state of balance, it looks like the best way to do that is to bring a bunch of Hornets or F8s. So what can be done? Well, we're looking at two separate issues. Until AI blades and NPC crews are implemented, the solution to the PDC meta is very simple, which would be to remove the infinite ammo pools from PDCs and replace them with a capacitor. This would make them a part of the resource network, which would make it possible for the attackers to overwhelm the defenses and for the crew to adjust the available resources. I would extend this by creating a weapons control station on the bridge that would allow the user to control the torpedoes and also the PDCs. Now, of course, the PDCs are automated, so what is there to control? Well, in this regard, I quite like the AA controls in World of Warships, where you can set the priority sector which will temporarily have more AA firepower available. So I would like to see something similar, where the weapon operator would be able to route more power to some sectors covered by the PDCs depending on where the attackers are. This would make the gameplay pretty interesting. And once NPC gunners and AI blades are introduced, the controls could be also put into this station. Now, the general problem of multi-crew is much more complicated, but it can be somewhat simplified into 2 points. First, multiple fighters may collectively have more health than a gunship. And second, multiple fighters may have more firepower than a gunship or a similar ship with turrets. And even with the same weapons, the fighter will have a range advantage due to how projectiles work. Also, in theory, multiple ships can cover more area or engage more targets than a single ship with multiple turrets. So why would anyone, for example, bring a Valkyrie with 3 people on board when they can instead bring 3 Hornets and get pretty much the same total hull hit points and a bit more damage output? Of course, besides the obvious reasons of not everyone has a fighter to take instead and not everyone can fly it as well as they would be manning a turret. But either way, if you look at the numbers only, this doesn't look good for multi-crew. The community has actually proposed multiple solutions. Many revolve around adjusting the hit point values of ships and their weapon loadouts and control schemes, which seems to be what's actually happening, but it doesn't look like it's resulting in any meaningful changes. Others have proposed that once armor and engineering are released, they will make larger ships more survivable, and thus more desirable to bring into combat. And that is partially correct. Armor would be a great addition, allowing some specific ships to tank more damage. But engineering actually increases the complexity of operating a large ship, which might discourage some people and make the problem even worse. Others suggest changing the behavior of weapons when attached to a turret, such as more range, damage, or rate of fire, which could be pretty interesting as a test, but I don't think adding special rules is a good basis for creating a balance. But it might be the only way to give larger ships the edge they are missing right now. Either way, as always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And with that being said, that will be all for today. What do you think? Is Polaris really the best dropship? How can CAG make multi-crew relevant? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.